Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone and welcome to Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with Cindy Magnuson, and the show is about to begin. So slow down, take a seat, put your feet up, and maybe take some notes, because this show is about you, it's for you, and it is designed to help you receive exactly what you need to be a happier and healthier you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being out there in radio listening land with me. For those of you who are new to me, I am Cindy Magnuson. I'm the owner of C Source Energy Epiphanies and founder of the C Technique EFT Plus. And tonight I have a really fun, exciting show. This is my first interview that I'm doing, so it is a very special night, in addition to the fact that we also are doing our official launching of Feminine Frequency Radio Network this week in honor of Lionsgate Portal. So tonight I will be interviewing Daniela Rambaldini, who is a medical intuitive and spirit reader, as well as she works in energy clearing, rejuvenation, and so much more. So Daniela, from age 3, knew that her soul's choice was to return to a life on earth to lovingly serve the Creator and the creation. Her lifelong passion has been to help share this world, to shape this world into a healthy, happy home for all who share it. She believes that when people gain a profound sense of self-awareness, whole body and mind health, and inner serenity, they'll lovingly embrace life and all of existence with awe, excitement, and deep reverence. Through a powerful transcendental meditative state of samadhi, Daniela's consciousness awoke into a remembered state of enlightenment, self-realization, and God realization at the age of 3. Throughout her childhood, she experienced powerful meditative states of expansion, elation, and loving bliss for the Creator and all of creation. She has innate synaesthetic skills of clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairsentience, telepathy, and perception and manipulation of subtle energy. And all of which, by the way, she will be discussing tonight and helping us to better understand this level of in-depthness that she goes into. By dedicating herself to heal the pain and suffering she witnessed all around her, and that she experienced herself as being a young child who is very empathic in her own soul journey, Daniela has been learning a myriad of ways to help transform and transmute ancient karmic frequency distortions that cause a separation from source. As she continues to learn and grow on her path, Daniela remains lovingly dedicated to supporting all beings along their soul journey of self-actualization. She offers medical, intuitive, and energy intuitive readings with spirit messages, Akashic Records readings, and energy medicine readings for children, youth, adults, and animals. Isn't that an amazing lineup here? Bravo, Daniela. That is absolutely beautiful. And I personally invited Daniela on tonight because I so strongly resonate with the ideologies that are in her work, with the levels that she works on. And a very big theme of Twilight Epiphanies is to help establish a very unified sense of working in this field to sort out between some of the distortions that have come in healing work through New Age and some modern spiritual theories that have kind of infiltrated this work. And I really identified with Daniela's work when she would speak about how you have to engage in a healing session with someone, a reading session with someone in a very open stance of not blanket statements. We don't want or ideologies that have a limiting structure on them to be placed over people's experiences. You have to be very open, and in that, a very adept reader can read very purely what is taking place and not accidentally express something that is a limiting belief because of some dogmatic teaching. So I super appreciate her work, and without any further ado here, I am going to open up and say hello to Daniela.
Hello, Cindy. Hello, Cindy.
Oh.
Hello? Am I on?
Yes,
Can you hear me
here.
okay?
Hello. Yes.
Okay, great.
You're coming through very clear.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction. I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited. And very happy for you that you're starting this show as well and making it a regular occurrence. So kudos to you for that. And once again, thank you for inviting me for the first interview. That's quite an honor.
It is.
I'm lighting,
yes,
I'm lighting some incense from India. I'm sorry, what's that?
I have those great big nice goosebumps on. Yes, I'm really excited to have you. I'm vibing right there with you. Okay,
awesome.
So I want to get right in and hear, about your work. So let's start with that introduction and understanding that you started at age 3, and what are the highlights that brought you from age 3 to how you decided to move into the field of work that you do?
For sure. So a lot of the highlights, salient occurrences, meaning they were important and relevant, but they weren't all very pleasant. And many practitioners who are heart-centered practitioners and in the field, in whatever scope that they're in the field of helping either humanity or even just the collective consciousness, working in the field with wildlife, working in social spheres, whatever it is that they're doing when they're in a very heart-centered space, many of these individuals, if not perhaps all of them, have had very intense experiences of their own trauma in their own personal journey, and it really helps to fuel your desire and your love and your devotion and dedication for being in service. And so, while I was blessed with many gorgeous, blissful, I don't even know what to call them, but experiences that were, literally beyond this world, and so blessed and so intense and so inspiring and so full of love. I've also had a lot of experiences that felt so profoundly traumatic and confusing and painful. And through the combination of the contrast, I guess, these extreme blissful states that I would feel when I was either in a meditative state or I was in a devotional state, but, still embodied, or just being around humans. I love humans so much, and being in natural spaces, I'm in love with Gaia consciousness, and just being in those moments where so much, and I don't want to say was, I still am, right? But it's a continuum, of course, where I'm in such a blissful state of love and awe and reverence, and move to the point of tears where I can't even contain how much love and appreciation I feel. And I imagine that there are many people on this planet who can relate to that when you have that very intense emotion that is overwhelming about how much you love and feel alive. And then contrast that with an experience where you've been hurt so profoundly and you've been disempowered so profoundly, and you feel the pain and the discordance and the distortion and the fear in another human. And it, to experience this as a child, it was a lot to learn how to balance. And at times, I must say that I wanted to abort mission because it was so difficult. I just wanted to go back home because, like, beam me up.
Sure.
This is not where I want to be anymore. It's too difficult. I didn't know I signed up for this.
Yes, we relate.
So it's, probably a lot of people can relate. And it was never intended as me not wanting to be alive. And it wasn't even a suicidal thought in the way that maybe is a typical way to think of suicide, because I knew that leaving this earthly plane wouldn't mean the death of my consciousness identity, but there is still that strong desire for me to burst my consciousness identity and to come into a completely unified state with the all. So it's been interesting to be embodied. I'll just say that. It hasn't always been. I just want to be very clear that as much as I absolutely adore my life journey and I'm very grateful for it and I'm infinitely, eternally devoted, it has not been very easy. And just to maybe skip ahead to what it is that we want to talk about, ultimately a lot of the distortion in the modern spiritual world and the spiritual media, we can even say, like, it's really reached that point. There's a glamorization. There's an enormous glamorization of the healer archetype and a glamorization of the guru archetype, the spiritual leader, and et cetera. And so many people want to step into that. And they want to step into it because it sounds sexy and they think that they'll get validation and attention. It's for all, I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but it's not in alignment with what this path actually is. It's a very, very challenging path, and it's one that when you really do devote yourself to walking it, it breaks you. It's intended to break you. It's intended to destroy absolutely every thought that is a distortion and every emotion that is rooted in fear and every belief system that you are hiding behind as a safety net. It's a very, very challenging path, and to be in service in its true form is, I wouldn't say it's sacrificial, but on a lot of levels you are, you do sacrifice earthly pleasures in a way. I mean, they don't become as important. They don't become as important, right? Your devotion is what is most important, but it's not easy because you are in embodied form. So yeah, maybe that's just jumping ahead, and maybe that's a heavy way to start the show. But just wanted to be clear that as listening to the bio and my introduction, and so much that I want to share about how beautiful life is and how gorgeous it is. It's just that it requires dedication and commitment, and it requires your presence, and it requires that you engage and choose it every day. And this is really, truly the true spiritual journey. And it's the true journey of the soul. And it's the true journey of devotion. And the bliss and the wholeness and fulfillment that you feel goes beyond any sort of satisfaction of the senses that you might imagine or experience in the physical form. And so it's something that needs to be lived to be truly understood and felt, and to fall in love with it, it's something that it's something that you choose, but it's also something that chooses you. It's not something that, once your soul is on this trajectory and on this path, and once you have made that choice, it is not a choice that you can extricate yourself from very easily. It is you are an embodiment of it. And so I like to sort of make it clear, only because it can be very easy to, as I mentioned, sort of fall in love with the sexiness of what enlightenment is, of what being a so-called healer is, or a leader or a spiritual teacher. It can be very easy to distort what it actually is intended to be, and I don't want to contribute to that distortion in any way.
Sure.
I really, I don't like to say I take it seriously in the sense that I'm rigid. This is still a journey of love and joy. It very much is.
Sure.
But it requires a lot of responsibility, and I honor the responsibility as much as I honor the amazing blessing and opportunity it is to be living this and to be offering myself in this way, to be among the many who are offering themselves in this way.
And so you would say then, as I'm hearing, that this amazing contrast between the blissful states and the suffering of the world moved you into a space that kind of just unfolded, that medical intuitive work and spirit readings sort of came on your path a little bit more. Is that how you would say it sort of developed into you, that it opened up that way? It's sort of out of that contrast of what you were seeing. And I do completely understand and appreciate your space of wanting to not sell our workspaces as such as that they are glamorous. I really 100% plus could not agree with you more, and which is why you are here, because I have that same feeling and understanding to not move it into something that it really isn't, because it is very difficult for many reasons. And as now we move into your medical intuitive work, can you give us some examples that if someone comes to you for a medical diagnostic reading, how might you prepare them to what you are going to be offering them? I think it's so beautiful in your work that you offer a space where you both are doing the intuitive reading, bringing them information, and then you operate on very different dimensional levels within that. And as well, you also provide a natural route to working with that afterwards. So can you sort of lead us in and tell us a little bit about what you would offer in your work and how someone might be prepared, what they would expect in working with you?
For sure. The way that I do my work has changed a little bit over time, at least inwardly, because I hear one of the questions that you also wanted to ask was, what my process is and how it actually happens. Maybe I'll touch upon that after I explain what it's like to have a session. In the session, I offer live readings, and I offer also in-depth readings. So for the in-depth reading, essentially I have someone's name, and through their name it acts like an address. It acts like an access code. And before I have session with the person, before I meet the person, before I speak to the person, I access their field and I read it. And I read it the way someone would read a book, except I'm not using my physical eyes, but it's a whole body information download is basically what it is. And I will download whatever information is encoded in the field. If I'm doing an Akashic Records reading, then I go deeper into the field to perceive what has been imprinted over parallel/past lifetimes, only because time is not linear the way we know it. So the words parallel and past don't always really encompass what these dimensional realms really are. But there's memory encoded, there's information encoded. Or I'll do a reading for this present lifetime and look at that information and what is happening in the person's life, both physically, emotionally, mentally. It's all the same. And then I will have a session with that person and we'll discuss it. And it's basically having a conversation about yourself. It's similar to having an appointment with perhaps a naturopathic doctor or some other practitioner who's in the natural health field, where when you speak about your physical symptoms and imbalances, you discuss a lot more than just the physical body. You discuss your relationships, your emotions, the experiences that you've had in your life, and it's a much more holistic and comprehensive and in-depth discussion. And that's essentially what the in-depth readings are. The live readings are very, very similar, wherein I'm live in session over the phone or over a video call, online video call, and I do the same thing, but it's not as in-depth as the in-depth readings. And once again, we just discuss what it is that I'm perceiving. And it's a combination, the information that I share is a combination of what I perceive through my own energy field and what is being shared through communication with spirit guides, streams of consciousness that can be considered spirit guides. I'm not a big fan of a lot of the labels that we use, particularly in English, because I feel that they're very limiting. But just to make it easier, because it gives someone, now the concept of spirit guides is something that people can relate to, so it's easier to use that term. But I don't always experience them in like the stereotypical way that someone might describe a spirit guide, and some other people might experience spirit guides in that way. I don't always. I experience that communication in different ways. That yeah. So because I've also studied natural medicine formally. I've been a student literally my entire life. Ever since I was a child, I was extremely curious. I was always learning about the natural world, and I grew up in a home where my mother was always learning about natural medicine as well. And it wasn't until prior to being a medical intuitive, I was actually a wildlife conservation biologist. I was in academia. I was a scientist, and I had gone to university and done my master's in science because my intention was to help protect wildlife, particularly animals, but just Gaia in general from what I felt was, the ignorance of humans. I never wanted to work with humans directly because from the time I was a child, even though at the age of 3, I knew that my spirit came to work with people, but then when I started to witness what was going on in the world, I thought, oh no, the animals need me more. I'm going to work with the animals.
Yeah.
So that's what I did for many years, and then divine process and providence changed my life while I kicked and screamed and resisted and didn't want to work with humans, but my life path changed, and I stopped working with animals and started to work with humans. And in the process of this switch, of this transformation, part of it happened because I became very burnt out and I wouldn't say quite sick, but very out of balance, very profoundly out of balance. A lot of trauma that was imprinted had accumulated, and just working with wildlife and with governments and non-government organizations, which I worked with directly, and First Nations communities to work with. I was trying to, help out with or contribute to protecting endangered species, and it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking, and so it really took a toll on me because I was so sensitive and empathic and wasn't really taking care of myself very much, and it was very difficult to see how no matter how many people really cared about protecting certain species or certain environments and ecosystems, that ultimately money talks. And sure, a lot of my colleagues were, and myself included, we were absolutely devoting our blood, sweat, and tears to certain research, and along comes industry, and they have money, and so that's what the government listens to, and we just lost our peaceful land that we've been, so it was very disheartening. So I needed to take care of myself, and that's when I started to learn about natural medicine, because the Western medical system did absolutely nothing to help me. If anything, I felt that they were sort of putting me off track a little bit, but there were a couple of doctors who I met were absolute angels, I must say, and I'm forever grateful to them. But not all the doctors that I met were that, heartfelt and wise enough to go beyond the Western medical system. So I did experience firsthand my own disappointment with the approach of the Western medical system. So I decided that I was going to learn how to take care of myself and heal myself, because I still wanted to go back out into the field and work with animals. But in the process of learning formally and studying natural medicine, I never ended up going back to do my PhD and study wildlife the way I had planned. And instead, my psychic abilities, which I've always had, started to come back stronger to the point where I couldn't ignore them. And honestly, medical intuition I didn't even know what it was. But one morning I woke up and a combination of me stating it to myself and the message being delivered to me was, I'll be a medical intuitive. And one of the and at that time, I suddenly knew what it was. So there were words that I had never consciously read or heard, but in that moment, it was just a knowing. And while I was studying natural medicine, many of my teachers just saw my natural gift and saw how I was with people and how much compassion I had, and so they always encouraged me to have my own practice, and I said I didn't want to because I felt that there was no way I could ever know the wholeness of what someone is going through in order for me to take on the responsibility to give them advice, because I saw how people, in student clinic, I saw how people would come and they'd just be basically so desperate to have an answer and to have some sort of support and understanding about how, I'm suffering, how do I fix whatever it is that is paining me, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, in a relationship, whatever it is. And I just felt that was an enormous responsibility to give advice that if someone's coming to me really, really wanting an answer, how can I possibly assume that I'd know what this person is going through? I just always felt that through very basic and superficial diagnostic tools, there's so little that you end up knowing about a person. So I felt very insecure about it, and I felt like it would be irresponsible for me to pretend and put on a persona that I can help you, I can solve whatever it is that you're dealing with. So I didn't want to enter into the field. And when my psychic abilities started to get much stronger, then I trusted more that I could be of help in a more useful way. And even now, I don't pretend to. I always encourage people to work with multiple practitioners if they feel comfortable, and especially if they're working with something that's very intense. If they want to work with only me, I'm comfortable with that, but I don't, I don't encourage, not that I don't encourage the exclusivity, but I encourage, people to branch out and do whatever it is that is most powerful for them. And if that includes working with multiple practitioners, fantastic. I'm here to help. I'm not here to dominate your...
It's an honest place. And Daniela, I don't want to interrupt you here, but I am going to go to a commercial break, and it'll be about 3 minutes long. Thank you for that. What a beautiful development, is gone along there, learning about the natural medicine, and then having that background, being able to see inside a person the way you do. That's amazing. So the gifts go along together, the data and the intuition. I'm going to take a quick 3-minute break then, and when we come back, maybe you could give us one of your favorite spaces where you worked with someone, and explaining to us, with someone's privacy. Are you able to maybe tell us about one of the sessions and overall how it went, and what you were able to do for them? Okay?
Sounds good. Yes, sounds great. I can do that.
Oh, sure.
Makalaka.
is 929 477-1183, and to ask a question, press 1 to connect to the studio. Our guests share their stories and walking path of their healing, along with services that they have developed and packaged for the rest of the world to experience and benefit from. We're here to hold a space for an exchange of experiences for the purpose of evolvement and expansion of consciousness.
Hi, I'm Alice.
And I'm Audrey.
Have you always been drawn to the metaphysical?
The mystical? The paranormal?
Have you found yourself wondering about angels, spirits,
ghosts? Do you sometimes feel like you connect with the unseen, but you're not sure?
Join us for Through the Mystic's Closet on Feminine Frequency Radio Network.
Mondays, 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And chat with us.
Because Dev in marketing and Mark in accounting just don't understand.
But we do.
Hello and welcome. You are now entering the corridors of Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with your host, Cindy Magnuson. Premiering Thursday evenings, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Feminine Frequency Radio Network. You are invited on a talk radio journey to the center of self. Join us as Cindy guides you, the listeners, in sensory and perception upgrades where revelations and golden epiphanies pierce the veils of illusion. Don't miss this opportunity for your next dose of Twilight Epiphanies. Okay, Daniela, are you still with me here?
I am.
Yes, hello. Okay, very good. Okay, it would be wonderful if you can share, what you're able to, a little bit of a space to bring the listener a little bit more deeply into seeing how direct your work, how it is directly working.
For sure. And truthfully, there are quite a few, it's difficult for me to think of one specific session. I think more along the lines of individuals who I work with and how far they've come. And every individual is different. Some people come to me as an advisor, and they come to me for years. Well, I've been in practice for a little over 4 years, so in that span of time, some individuals have been with me for that long, and there are some individuals who I've just witnessed such a phenomenal transformation, and they express it too. It's not just physical. With some individuals, certain ailments completely resolve themselves. With other individuals, it's an emotional, psychological transformation where they come into their true self. They lose their limiting beliefs. They lose their fearfulness about certain things. They come into a greater confidence, a greater clarity. They don't get triggered as much. They start to open up their higher sensory perceptions. They are able to live their life in a much more joyful way because their mind and emotions aren't scattered and all over the place, and so they're able to live the life that they've always wanted to live, not just necessarily externally where they get stuff or they have the dream partner, the dream whatever. It's internally where they come into a deeper joy and a deeper serenity and a deeper celebration of who they are and of what life is, and a deeper empowerment. So that's always very magnificent for me to witness, and a deeper wisdom. They step into their own wisdom. I'm here as a guide, not as someone to, infuse thoughts into you.
Yes.
It's guiding you to your own core wisdom and your journey, because that ultimately is what is going to make a difference in your life. There are individuals, including animals, and children, and this is one of my greatest pleasures, to work with animals and children, and to witness that there's their changes in animals and children is very magnificent, because I know that it's not working at the level of the conscious mind. It's working at the level of the spirit and of energy. So when I've done energy transmissions, where I've telepathically, I don't want to say entered an energy field. I don't enter the energy field, but I affect the energy field. When I telepathically affect an energy field and organize the energy flows and remove energy blocks and resolve certain karmic imprints, and particularly if it's a human, it's really remarkable to see the shifts that happen. Again, the certain physical imbalances and symptoms that resolve, anything from physical pain and immobility to anxiety, to metabolic imbalances and digestive imbalances, injuries, and things like that have been reversed or resolved. Sometimes in as much as one session. Sometimes it takes multiple sessions. Again, it depends on the individual, and it depends on what the imbalance is, how long it's been there, what it's there to teach the person. And again, like working with animals, it's really fascinating to see the shifts in the animals, because like I said, it's not a placebo effect. The animal has no idea what I'm doing and doesn't know what's happening to it, and to see the animal respond in real time when I'm doing the session. And then also to hear from the person friend of the animal that certain symptoms have improved or gotten or resolved. You know, things like anxiety and separation anxiety and digestive issues and rashes, skin rashes and things like that. It's really rewarding. I have to say, it's very exciting. I can't think of one session in particular, although there are many times where I have a session and I feel really excited about it afterwards because of what's shifted. A lot of individuals have had also very profound, particularly adults, although some children have also a few children have remarked that they see things in their third eye, or they'll feel things in their head, and they'll see certain things. But adults tend to have quite a few interesting experiences in the energetic transmissions, where they will open up to, I guess, higher dimensional planes. I've guided a few people to do astral travel to meet their star family or their soul family, and that's always been really interesting to do. I don't do it with all clients. I don't feel that all clients are ready for that, but there are some, and I like to call them individuals. I don't like to call them clients. I don't see people like that. I mean, I work with people. I don't work with clients. I feel that not all people are ready for that. So it's something that I don't even advertise, truthfully. But when I feel that someone is ready for it, or sometimes it happens spontaneously, then I will guide it intentionally. And they have very profound experiences where they're able to get their own answers for their own challenges. And that's one of my favorite things to do, where I can open up someone's channels to connect with their higher self and their deep intelligence. Because no matter how perceptive I am, and no matter how much I'd like to think and sort of be proud of my abilities or whatever it is, like there's nothing that's going to match your own experience of this, and there's nothing that's going to match that I can do that's going to match or surpass the wisdom and intelligence that is available to you and only for you through your own inner connection to your higher self. There's always that sacredness that no practitioner, no reader, no guru can touch. It's not meant for us. It's not meant for anyone else. It's meant for you. So to be able to guide someone to access that sacred wisdom, that sacred knowledge that is specific for you in your life path is quite the honor. Quite the honor.
That's beautiful. And in that space, as you were saying, that it's people are sort of tuned out of, in a sense, really listening to true organic source primordial space. And so in your space, being able to recognize when someone is listening to an inaccurate, maybe a lower level voice within them. I see in your work you're able to differentiate between what might be hanging on into their energy field, some attachment or thought form, maybe entity, whatever terms, I saw on your website you like to, there's clarity between some of these terms, and then some terms you're basically talking about this, just an energy in general, so you can be deduced down to something that's the same but slightly different. So, but being able to, as you're describing accurately, help someone to release from where they are identifying with a lesser space and retune them back in, then yes, they are at that very pure space. Very beautiful. And so I wanted to ask you if you could also talk a little bit more about these types of infiltrations, tuning into lesser spaces, maybe, whether it's an infiltration that has been ancestral into the genetics, into the ancestral line, such as, like you have identified on some of your beginning pages as someone that you worked with who had a curse on their energy field. And these, of course, are the more in-depth areas, but I really like the way, you began and just addressed and said, I work with what comes in and they bring to, on their plate right there. I also identify with that. I like doing that. Let's just start with what the energy story is here, because that's going to identify the big energy story that's, holding everything up. And then it, appears that you very selectively can tune into a dimensional space that's going to be identified where you can help someone release from that space by both influencing them with your energy field and helping them to identify it through a little bit of dialogue also. So if you can maybe elaborate on a little bit of those spaces, what you tend to sometimes can encounter. I do have a variance of listening audiences, and I appreciate that you're able to digest it onto an understandable level. And I just want to say too, while we're talking about it, there's nothing wrong with these things. They are facts that we work with. So if you can take that away and maybe tell us a little bit more about that, between spirit attachments or false spirit or golems and things like that, what do you have encountered?
For sure. And this is a very, as you probably know, and other practitioners know as well, this is a very, very broad scope of things, let's say. It encompasses a lot.
Which is why accuracy has to be so good. Yes. Yeah.
Because it does encompass a lot. And there's also a lot of fable that's associated with it, right? A lot of fantasy and a lot of to this point where we may be talking about a similar thing, but the stories are different. So we've given them different names when really at the core there's whatever thing or object or entity we're speaking of is the same thing, but coming from various traditions or various perspectives, we've given them different names. So my experience of this realm, in the way that I describe it, in the way that I've witnessed it and worked with it, may be similar or different from other people's experiences, but it doesn't make their experiences any less valid. And one thing that I've come to recognize, at least in my working model of reality as I have experienced it and have come to know, or not know it, but witness it, I'm still learning. It's vast. It's very, very vast. And and I've never really felt like I've reached a point where I've grasped the totality of it. I don't know if I ever will reach that point when I'm in embodied form in this lifetime or another. But in my experience, there are different ways that low frequency signatures of different dimensions present themselves in our experience. And I have seen things with my third eye, my so-called mind's eye. I have seen things with my physical eyes. I have heard things, and I have felt things tangibly. I have felt things within myself as well, like in a clairsentient way. And a lot of what people might call the paranormal. I've had, I wouldn't say like many experiences with these, but I've had definitely my fair share. The first entity that I saw when I was 3 years old in the experience of samadhi. I had a few experiences of samadhi, but in the most powerful experience of samadhi, where I attained, my consciousness awoke, and I attained a state of self-realization and a certain level of enlightenment and God realization, and witnessed a lot in that experience. And it was the first time that I saw entity or evil or whatever you might want to call it. And truthfully, I knew it was just an expression of fear. It was just an expression of that which has separated, not that it's ever really separated, but denied source on some level. So in the concept of how I processed things as a child, I had no fear for it. In fact, I didn't even have patience for it. My attitude was, oh, you don't scare me, just go away. This, how annoying. Like, I was annoyed by it more than anything. And I thought, that's rude and intrusive. Don't come into my field like this. Like, just be gone. Like, you're nothing to me. That you're nothing, not to me, but you're nothing. If I'm devoted to God. I am devoted to Source, and Source God power is so much stronger than you will ever be. So just go. You're like an annoying little buzz of a thing.
A buzz, yes. Yeah.
Really, like, and not, it wasn't. There was no arrogance, and there wasn't even a sense of judgment or attitude. But it was more of. It just felt like a silly child's game for me. And then in my waking life, I could feel that same frequency of energy. I could feel it in different people's energy fields, and truthfully, I felt it go in and out of people's energy fields, so it wasn't always present. So when a person was embodying joy or happiness or love, those frequencies overshone. I don't know, okay, that's not a word, but like outshined is what I wanted to say, but outshone, I don't know if you can make it past tense, but it outshines, it outshines those lower frequency forms. They cannot exist in that energy field. And the challenge with most humans is that they don't stay in that high, clear, blissful, unconditional state of unconditional love and joy and acceptance for a very long period of time. They vacillate in and out. And so they tend to maintain attachments, or they tend to maintain an energy field where they are susceptible or prone or welcoming and almost inviting and allowing these lower frequency forms to be present. And sometimes those lower frequencies are present, and they feed our thoughts. And so we may have these lower frequency thoughts and emotions that we think are our own, but they're not. And then at times it's vice versa. We create it out of our own fear, because ultimately the soul's journey is to not eliminate, but grow beyond and transcend those constructs that we call fear, those constructs that we call darkness or evil or shadow or whatever we want to call it. So sometimes it is something that it is in our own creation. So many people might feel that they have entities, and that may be true, but it could also be that it's not quite an entity, but it's a persistent energetic imprint or program or thought form that they are carrying either karmically from many lifetimes or they've created in this lifetime. Again, the words may not be the best way to describe this, but these experiences that may feel like entities may actually simply, and I still say that with a lot of compassion because it doesn't sound that simple, it doesn't feel that simple at times, but it may simply be a thought form that is persistent or a karmic imprint that is running a program or a memory that is dark. And again, I use the word darkness loosely because that's still not the best term I find. Entity attachments can also be of, and again, this is my experience, and others may have a different understanding of this, but in my experience working with individuals, and in my own experiences of meditation, entities can be from various dimensions. But what I find with most of them is they're related to some experience that an individual has had, either as an embodied form in this matrix or in another matrix. So it's like a relationship that you have, similar to a relationship that you might have with another person, that maybe at one time you were friends with this person, you had some sort of relationship with this person, and things didn't go very well, things weren't resolved, and then you physically move away, and maybe after a lot of time and space separation, you don't remember each other, but there's always that echo or that shadow of that person still there. And until it's finally resolved, until you learn the lesson and really let things go, that's one thing that I've also noticed as well, is that you need to let go of the entity, not remove the entity. You need to let go of the entity, which means that even if you have a practitioner remove on some level an entity, you have to let it go in order for it to be permanently gone. And in order for you to let it go, you need to grow through a certain transformation or a certain lesson, let's call it, in order for you to no longer resonate with that frequency that keeps you bonded to that entity. So I find that this is true and real for entities that are of this dimension or of what we might call an alien entity. And this is a very, I think, very powerful and exciting and encouraging realization, because it puts the power back into our choices and into our path, and the way that we choose to allow or disallow a certain experience to be our experience. Not to say that it's easy. If it were easy, no one would have entity attachments. But it really does remind you that we are not victims to these attachments. We're not victims to thought forms that may be lingering in our energy field. And we're not, in the same way, we're not victim to people and to the effects of people's actions. Because one thing I remind individuals of is, if you want to understand the relationships that you can have with spirit guides and angels or with entities, just personify the experience a little bit to understand that even though it's not going to be exactly the same as dealing with a person, it is very similar in the sense that if you're in a dispute with someone, the most powerful thing to do is to stand in a state of love and to not engage with the dispute if you want it to end or if you want to resolve the conflict. That's the same thing with attachments to entities. You stand in your own state of love in the most powerful way. You don't engage with whatever relationship, whatever interaction you're experiencing with that entity. And again, it doesn't mean it's easy at all, because if you're in a state where there are entity attachments, then clearly you haven't attained the the ease or the awareness of how quickly and how powerfully you can embody a loving state, right? This is what you're struggling with, and this is why it oftentimes is relevant to work with someone to help guide you back to your state of power and empowerment. But I just say this to remind people that you have a tremendous amount of power. We all do. And that power is accessed breath by breath, moment by moment, choice by choice. And if in one moment you are not able to cultivate a neutralizing effect on this lower energy form, where you can neutralize that energy form by standing in a place of power that just matches it, let alone transcends it, if you're not able to do that in one quick breath, then you can do that incrementally. But you need to be committed to that. You need to believe in yourself. You need to trust that this is true and real. Trust that you have more power. Trust that God has more power. And that as you stand in your divinity and your wholeness and your state of unconditional love and light, as we might want to call it, then that is the only force and power and strength that you need. And that's all within you. Yes. All within you. I'm not sure if that's answering your question. I digressing a little bit. But.
Oh, no, that was so very accurate and detailed. I completely resonate, and I'm sure the listening audience does also. That was very thorough and wonderful and so very true. And that space of, as healer, you are helping someone to remind themselves of their personal power, and that process of elimination of taking away those, helping them to remove the limiting beliefs in order so they can open up this powerful space. And it is a feeling space. So you are, as healer, are holding that neutral space of no doubt for them, and inviting them to sympathetically resonate with that again, and saying you do have the power through love and no fear to complete what sometimes is, as you were saying, I kind of put it in a term sometimes of unfinished business. With these spaces, there is some type of a connection that has people still resonating on some level. And here's the thing, whether we know what that exact connection is, or if it even is a first cause in this time frame, nonetheless, we have free will. And somewhere our belief system, some story, as I would call it, in time, it's still connecting us to this space. So that was just remarkable. Thank you. And I am, every half hour here, we go to a commercial break. So I am going to go to a 3-minute commercial break again. And when you come back, I would like to have you talk about, as you mentioned, that some cases do take longer because people have a relationship that is a little bit more in depth with learning something from a space, and how much a person's will has, their own personal will, as we're talking about here, has to do with their healing, and even how they are referencing looking at something within themselves. So we can come back and talk about that then. Okay?
Sounds great. Yes.
All right.
Organic Frequency Radio Show is 1.5 hour live chat with Stephanie and Oksana and their lovely guests about the nature of existence and holistic way of living here and now, and perhaps even after. Join us every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Call-in number to listen live is 929-477-1183, and to ask a question, press 1 to connect to the studio. Our guests share their stories and walking path of their healing, along with services that they have developed and packaged for the rest of the world to experience and benefit from. We're here to hold a space for an exchange of experiences for the purpose of evolvement and expansion of consciousness.
Hi, I'm Alice.
And I'm Audrey.
Have you always been drawn to the metaphysical?
The mystical? The paranormal?
Have you found yourself wondering about angels, spirits,
ghosts? Do you sometimes feel like you connect with the unseen, but you're not sure?
Join us for Through the Mystic's Closet on Feminine Frequency Radio Network.
Mondays, 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And chat with us.
Because Deb in marketing and Mark in accounting just don't understand. But we do.
Hello and welcome. You are now entering the corridors of Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with your host, Cindy Magnuson, premiering Thursday evenings, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Feminine Frequency Radio Network. You are invited on a talk radio journey to the center of self. Join us as Cindy guides you, the listeners, in sensory and perception upgrades where revelations and golden epiphanies pierce the veils of illusion. Don't miss this opportunity for your next dose of Twilight Epiphanies. Okay, and welcome back. So we are in the last half hour, and we may go a little bit over here tonight if Daniela has time to stay on the line in case we are running over. And I'd like to remind everyone that we are in the middle, beginning actually here, of the Lionsgate portal launch of Feminine Frequency Radio Network. And earlier on the show, I gave everyone information about how you can enter to win our first prize giveaway this week. There will be 2 prizes each week in this official month-long launch of the opening for Feminine Frequency Radio Network. And this first gift is a 30-minute psychic reading, mystic reading as she calls it, with Audrey Cortez, and that's an $88 value. So everyone go onto the Facebook page and you will follow along on Instagram and Facebook for both Feminine Frequency Radio Network as well as at Insights with Audrey. Okay, so we have been talking with Daniela Rambaldini, who is a medical intuitive and spirit reader, and she does healing work with animals, children, and youth. And we have been having a very beautiful in-depth conversation here. I'm super appreciating it. And I just would like maybe to elaborate a little bit now on how much a person's will being enacted in their healing has an effect on what healing is going to take place. And Daniela was talking about how we can, as healers, she can remove an entity attachment, but if the person isn't actively making the changes that they need to do, there's going to be another situation that comes on again. So it has to be from the individual's will. And also, Daniela, as you begin again here, I'd like to know if you could talk about the karmic responsibility that healers have in working with people at the level that you are working with.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And I'm so glad that you asked that, because a lot of people don't think about that. And this sort of touches upon what I was mentioning at the beginning of the episode, where this work and this life path and this journey, whatever you want to call it, when you're in service in such an intimate way with individuals, it really requires a lot of responsibility. It's not something to do just because you think it's glamorous or because you're drawn to it out of a kind of egocentric need to be validated and perhaps glamorized. And this is not to say that I think individuals shouldn't explore the path if they're drawn to it. Just really understand what it is that's drawing you to it. It is an embodiment. It's not a job, and it's not a role that you play. It is something that you live. And in its truest sense, it's not sexy at all. Maybe social media has made it sexy now because you can advertise yourself in that way, but it's not intended to be a sexy thing. So there is definitely, like I said, taking on responsibility, and in that, I think the words that you said are karmic responsibility. Is that what you just said? Karmic.
Yes. Our entanglements, when we are, when we observe something, you're affecting it. So as healers, we are affecting the energy field simply in the observation that we do take upon, which, again, we're talking about such a huge responsibility here when you are working in these levels. I've been in the field for a very long time now, and I have, just like you, have seen the most diverse of unfortunate situations happen where people are limiting someone's ability to grow through, perhaps some kind of a spiritual mem or a blanket dogmatic teaching, response that they're telling them. So the karmic entanglement that we are on when we are observing a person's energy field, when we are interacting with it.
Mm-hmm. So when you are in a state of authentic service, in the sense that you are present for the individual, you are present for not yourself, but present in a state of unconditional love and unconditional giving, then you do not take on any of the individual's karma. So you are there as a channel. You're essentially working as a channel. You are empty. You are not living your own desires or fears or intentions. So in that space and time when you're interacting with another individual, you're literally a conduit. The extent to which you are clear as being a conduit and not bringing any of your own story into that space is the extent to which you will carry and attract and attach no karma. So if you are 100% clear conduit and you bring nothing but you as an empty vessel and channel, then you take on absolutely no karma. However, if there's 5%, 10%, 50% of your entanglement in it, then you will magnify whatever karma you are in resonance with that other individual is embodying. And this is why it's very important that if you are in this role, if you want to take this on, that you have a very deep and profound and intimate relationship and awareness of yourself and of what your vulnerabilities are, what your strengths are, what your energy field is and what it feels like, what you are, for lack of a better way of describing all of this. And to have a certain level of mastery over all of that so that there isn't an intrusion or an imposition or even onto another person's energy field or a vulnerability on your part. And this is why it requires a lot of responsibility and awareness and maturity. And when I say maturity, I don't necessarily mean it in the physical world sense. It's a spiritual maturity that presents itself as emotional and psychological maturity in the physical world, but it is a spiritual maturity and a certain level of adeptness as well. So if you have attained that state, then your presence in another person's journey and the ability for you to guide another individual on their journey will be much more effective and relevant for the individual who you're working with, and much more clear for you. And in fact, I don't even know if I should say this, but to a certain degree, the extent to which you guide someone along their path in a pure state, you kind of get karma points in a way. Good karma points.
We grow with them,
Yeah, but that's not something you can fake, right? Like if you're doing it because you think you're going to get a reward, you're not going to get a reward. Then that is you doing it for your own desire. So it just happens. And this is the way that, sometimes people speak of it as the universe supports your work, and it does. That's kind of the good karma that you get. So your work does get supported, you get supported, your sustenance gets supported because you are acting as a channel and a conduit. And even just by acting as a channel and a conduit and living that way, then you bring on and you literally create for yourself a life where the wheels are greased, essentially. Yeah. And people talk about it in the form of manifestation these days. That's a big thing. And that is an irony in and of itself because I don't know if we'll touch upon this subject, but what is manifestation? It is the materialization of something, right? And so everyone's obsessed with materialization and they call it a spiritual.
Yes, I think definitely we could definitely talk a long time about that and have some very similar ideas and understandings. I know exactly what you're thinking. At this time, I would like to remind the listeners that in this particular show, as Daniela introduces her work, that we're not going to be taking any callers, but that I already asked Daniela if she will come back at another time and take callers. So for those of you, if you did have a question, hold on to that, or simply you are welcome to contact Daniela before she comes on again. So, and that is to talk about manifestation. Yes, I'm sure you're going to the space where it is, where people sort of have gotten a little bit alluded into materializing in the physical plane here is a little bit less to understanding how they can be applying their will to so many different other diverse areas. I see it happen very often, and meaning that there are more significant spaces, and I think people get very confused with thinking that they're supposed to be manifesting abundance, and it may not be the particular space that they're working with here. So it's very confusing to take on, as we were saying, some of this modern spiritual psychology here that is not exactly accurate because they're not really in tune with their own true source flow. They are being, influenced by a pressure, and we can feel that pressure. And, to talk to, in a sense, even come back maybe again, we can talk about this space and the pressure that some women even are feeling that they have to be some grand state of spiritual external expression, as opposed to sometimes just being the mom at home who is doing this incredible, most important space with the children. So that's another area, and you probably see that often in your works, of the very difficult space of being torn between the two. Well, as we are, we still have a little bit of time here, but I had mentioned also talking about the reincarnation cycle, and we are aware that there is a little bit of an infiltration, a hijacking into the genetic codes here, and a lot of humanity's tuning in is connected to a sort of reincarnation cycle that doesn't let them out of the time loops. So a lot of going to these past lives right now is to retrieve from the time loops, but to move forward from them, and some of the concepts that are limiting. So if you would like to express anything here about your understandings of reincarnation from its natural, true, organic, primordial state into sort of what it has become, because creation is so vast, and there are, as you so eloquently put it, these entities, energies in general that are no longer in tune with source directives because, as you put it, they are just a big buzz of fear. And that comes down to the bottom line. It is a ball of fear. It is a vibration of fear at its very basis, the fear of returning to source and facing self. It's really a facing self, so they've been creating these other false spaces for them to have control over, in a sense. Mm-hmm. So if you would like to elaborate.
For sure, and I'll just interject and say that we call it fear because that's how we describe it. That's how it feels when we're embodied. But there's something, I don't know if I should open up this can of worms, but I'm going to open it up anyway. So
sure,
this
please
is my own experience of this is my own experience of reality, and someone else may have a different experience and perspective. But what we call evil or darkness or intervention with dark overlords, et cetera, are part of the contrast that we experience in duality. And so there are so-called dark angels that do God's work. And the dark angels that do God's work are here to, this is my experience and an understanding and witnessing of it. These dark angels are sometimes coming to present almost like a test or a challenge for you to deepen your mettle, your spiritual mettle, your commitment, your devotion, your standing in your power, your standing in your truth, and to witness what it is that you're vulnerable to, what it is that is your weakness, what it is that maybe is your strength that you can overcome. And so we're not here to banish the darkness as a collective. It is your own journey to transcend those challenges and that darkness and what we might call fear or what we might call evil. It is the journey of the soul. But in the grand scheme of the play or the stage upon which a soul has his or her own journey, or its journey rather, because there's no gender to it, that contrast will always exist. It needs to. You need that friction there in order for the soul to have its experience, to make choices, and to transcend. So the so-called false reincarnation cycle or timelines, it may exist as a creation, a false creation, or a false matrix. However, truly the only thing, and again I say that it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy, the only thing you really truly need to do is to maintain a pure connection and a strong connection to your higher self, your true higher self. Now, what is the true higher self? This is where the deception lies, where we may feel like we are aligned to the so-called light, but it's the false light. And you'll know it's the false light as you come into your own journey of awareness and of of aligning to a higher truth that does not satisfy a psychological or physical pleasure. If you think that you are aligning to a higher, or to the divinity, or to a higher state, and you are feeling some sort of psychological or emotional or physical pleasure that is not bliss, it is a sensory pleasure, it is a gratification, then that is feeding the experience of separation and of individuality and of the so-called ego, or of the so-called, it's feeding the separation. Yes. If you have a sense of superiority, or if you have a sense of competition that is being gratified, you have a sense of winning, you have a sense of power that is being gratified, you are aligning to the false light. And that is your choice on some level, and also your experience and your journey. And you have just as much opportunity and possibility and capacity to transcend that enjoyment or that gratification, and instead humble yourself into aligning to a higher truth. But this comes with experience and maturity and choice. So we are never really truly prevented from accessing the true light or transcending the false reincarnation cycle, if you could even call it a false reincarnation cycle. I haven't experienced that in my own witnessing. What I have experienced in my own witnessing is the strength, the phenomenal strength and power of the higher, of the dimensions where the higher self consciousness not resides, but arises from. And it's phenomenal. And in my experience and in my intangible wisdom, however you want to call it, there is no force of evil that can overcome that. There's just no force of evil that can overcome the strength and power of what the Creator and the creative source is. So we are, once again, not victims. We are not trapped. We are not, we may be challenged. We may be very, very challenged, and maybe quite a long journey, particularly for some souls. But we are never denied. God doesn't deny anyone, and we are never, we will never meet a closed door if we truly devote ourselves to the Creator. We will never meet with a closed door. We will never meet with judgment that turns us away. We once again may be challenged for our sense of purity, but we will never be denied. And that's something that I feel really, really needs to be, really needs to be, I don't know if taught is not, but like, clarified, encouraged and clarified, and there's another word I'm looking for, but I can't think of it right now. But reassured, right? Like we need this reassurance because there's been so many generations and centuries and eons of the opposite message of from oppressors being fed into the psyche that carries forward across so-called reincarnations, and that manifests as an overarching layer of consciousness, of collective consciousness, even in this matrix, right? Like we're tapped into, we like to think that we have individual thoughts, and sometimes we may derive this unique imprint of energy that arises from our own experience. But most people, most of the time, their mental sphere is tapped into a collective consciousness that they're not creating those thought forms there. They're just regurgitating them. Yeah. So we need to have that choice and that awareness of choice and possibility within our own selves to transcend that and to think for our own selves, to create, not even think, but to create for our own selves and to witness and experience and have the courage to go beyond that which is being fed to us as truth and as reality.
Yeah, precisely. Beautifully stated. So very, very important. That is, and a great deal of the work you do, I experience this also, is in helping people to identify where they are tuned into this lower frequency of limited beliefs. Yes. And that I completely agree with you. It's not really possible for us to exist in a prison state of mind unless we believe we are in one. And this, and I agree with you in duality. I find it highly unfortunate to the levels of where free will has gone in the experiences here. And I appreciate being able to reach back into these deeper spaces and help to relieve some of the atrocities that have taken place in free will when people have gone, into these recesses a little bit farther. meaning that it's difficult to accept duality with some of the decisions that some energies have, in consciousness have made, and what has been manifested in the physical plane in the way of suffering. But here we are, and as you stated, there has to be free will in order to know self. A creator is free will, free creation, and we understand that we are basically helping people to reverse engineer some of this collective trauma wounding that they're tuned into, as you stated, that becomes this ancestral conditioning of fear to speak out, fear of repression, fear of, being. How many people experience just the fact that if they're going to speak out, that it's going to result in their death, because it has happened in other spaces. So there is a real true space, while there is a limiting blanket over it that says that it can't be removed, and that is not true. And in actuality, what I heard you saying, with an accurate level of reverse engineering, as you brought us back through there deeper, it is simply changing thought and perception that's going to change this reality the most. Yeah. And in a very, very, very dynamic way. Well, Daniela, we are rounding up the time here, and so I would like to have you talk to the listening audience about how they can get in touch with you and participate in your work with you, how they can reach you, and then we will close out the show after that.
Sounds great. So my website is energeticsofconsciousness.com. It's all one word. There are no dashes or spaces or anything like that, or underscores, and it's all lowercase. energeticsofconsciousness.com. And through that website, you can access all my social media pages, some of which are kept up to date and some of which are not, but I'm getting better at that. And my email address, there's a contact form on that website. There's also an online calendar. You can go ahead and book your own session if you like. And so there's a contact form, and also my email address, which is answers@energeticsofconsciousness.com. It's all on my website. And what I encourage, particularly individuals who've never had a session with me, maybe never had a session with a medical intuitive or a spirit reader or spirit guide, what I encourage people to do is to schedule a half-hour session, and it's $60 Canadian, so really, really inexpensive for people in the U.S. and in Britain and in the UK. It's very, very inexpensive.
Okay, great to know.
I have all over, or individuals. I work with individuals all over the world because I do all of my work remotely. So as long as you have access to a phone, or ideally to some sort of online app for online video call, we can have a session. And so I encourage people to schedule a half-hour session, and it's kind of an intro to see where you're at and how we can work together. And a lot can come up in half an hour. And most of the people who schedule half an hour end up extending the session to at least an hour. They say, okay, I'll add another half hour. This is really interesting. I don't want to cut it out yet.
Nice. Awesome.
A lot can come up in half an hour, and I do pack in quite a bit of information. So if there are pressing questions that you have, we can really address quite a lot and bring some clarity to where you're at. So that's oftentimes a really good way of just getting a feel for the kind of work that I do. And in terms of the energetic transmissions that I do have some videos on YouTube and on Vimeo that you can watch and give you a bit of a sense as to what of those sessions might look like, and that might give people another idea as to how they might want to interact with me. Feel free to send emails to my email. My assistant will take care of that, and I look forward to connecting with. I mean, I love meeting new people and working with people in different parts of the world, because they're in a different collective consciousness. It's quite fascinating to work with individuals all over the world. It's really quite beautiful. So I look forward to meeting whoever is listening.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
You're welcome, and thank you very much, Cindy.
Okay, and we will definitely schedule a time to have you back on again, and we'll decide on some more interesting topics and then open up to some callers, so it will be lots of fun. So Daniela, thank you again, and I will be talking to you in person after this sometime.
Great. Sounds great, Cindy. Thank you again, and good luck on this show, and congratulations on it. Very, very excited for you.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye now.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, everyone. So that ends the show tonight. That was super wonderful. And I would like to just say as we're leaving here, to remind you to get into that contest. We have definitely more interesting packages coming up right this week again. So get your chances to win in by following at those pages on Facebook and on Instagram. And next week's show, I'm going to have someone who is a teacher in Thai yoga massage. I had recently begun my journey in Thai yoga massage, and David is going to come on and talk to us more about this beautiful practice. So thank you all for joining. Much love to you, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye now.